This year's American presidential race is now truly underway. Last week, the Republicans held their convention in Cleveland. The Democrats are holding theirs in Philadelphia as we speak. Expect fevered campaigning over the next 104 days as political outsider Donald Trump goes head-to-head with insider Hillary Clinton, the first female presidential candidate in US history. If Clinton wins, after 45 First Ladies, America will have its first First Gentleman. And that is the title of a new political thriller come romance out early next month. Gerald Weaver, the author of the first First Gentleman, like his main character, Garth Teller, started life as a political strategist. At the age of 26, he was the youngest chief of staff in Congress. Welcome to the show, Gerald.
Thank you, Sophie. I'm happy to be here.
Sophie's the producer. My name's Edie.
But I'm sorry, Edie.
Do you know something?
I'm even happier to be
when you're in a different place, you're in London, we're in Edinburgh, it's very difficult. Sophie is absolutely lovely. I'm sure she's been charming you as you've been waiting to speak on the programme. This is your second novel. The first was Gospel Prism. But after writing countless speeches, press releases, political adverts, legal briefs and lobbying reports, how were you encouraged to turn to what really is what it says on the cover? Fiction.
Oh, that's an interesting story. I always wanted to be a writer, even as a child. And when I was at Yale University, I took a class from Harold Bloom, the great literary critic. Yeah. And he taught me that you can really love literature and it's got a tremendous impact. And then I had a class with the editor of Raymond Carver, who was also the editor of Esquire magazine, Gordon Lish, and he was a really brutal craftsman and said you had to pick every word carefully. And then I thought I couldn't really write until I would do some living first, and then I actually ended up doing quite a bit more living than I thought I would do. But the final jump came from my friend Marie Colvin, the famous journalist who died with a copy of my first novel on her when she was in Syria.
She was a Sunday Times foreign correspondent who was killed while she was reporting from there. How did you find out about that?
I was attending her funeral in New York, and her sister, who was 10 years younger than I, and whom I had never met, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're Gerald Weaver. I have to tell you that, Marie's body was buried to be hidden from the army, and it took us a week and a half to get it back, and it came back with her backpack, and in her backpack were, fresh underwear, satellite phones, and this large book, which was your manuscript."
And she'd been reading your manuscript. You had a sort of to and froing, wasn't she? I think she was one of your first loves, wasn't she?
Yes, she was. That was so long ago I can hardly remember it, Edie. But yeah, we met at university and we dated there, and shortly after, and then stayed in touch through various marriages and divorces and job changes. And when my daughter...
But never to each other?
No, never, no. Although she was married to the same man twice, which I found interesting. But we got closer again when my daughter went to university, because Marie was a bit of a feminist in the way, not that she was strident or political, but she would choose young women and become very much their mentor. And she did that with my daughter. So we began to be very close again. And then she said, "You should write the book, Gerald, because I'm tired of getting letters and emails that are more well-written than the novels I read." And so that was enough.
Yeah, well, that was your first book, which was Gospel Prism.
Right.
We're really here to talk about the First Gentleman, which is your second book. Mm-hmm. The main character is Garth Teller, a Harvard graduate who started his life as a political strategist. What else can you tell us about him?
Well, there are two main characters, Garth Teller and Melinda Sherman, and it's essentially a love story that becomes a political thriller and a social commentary. But he's sort of, what I want to do is hope that it redefines male gender roles, which is what I believe Bill Clinton will have the opportunity to do when he is the first gentleman. And
that's your prediction, is it?
I'm saying it's a hope. What Bill Clinton will actually do, I think, is another kettle of fish. And I have a pretty good insight on that as well, which I'll share with you. But because Garth Teller is divorced and takes care of his kids and his custody of them, he learns to be supportive and nurturing, and that's how he comes to love Melinda Sherman, who's somewhat injured psychologically and physically due to her service in the military. And that love affair becomes a campaign for the White House.
You have personally known many of Washington's key politicians because of the job that you had there. This is fiction, so they won't find their names in the index, but might a few be a little apprehensive?
It's funny you should say that, Edie, because the traditional Washington book is nonfiction, and everybody in Washington runs to the bookstore to see first if they are in the index, and then secondly to see whom they know might be in the index. And of course, a fiction novel has no index, but there may be some people who will think they recognize some other people or maybe themselves in the book, but of course it's fiction, so...
What was the insight you were going to give us about the Clintons?
Well, like I said, I hope to write this book because I wanted to sort of move along what I hope is the change in gender roles, and I think the opportunity will really be somewhat in the hands of Hillary Clinton, but even more in the hands of Bill Clinton, because it's difficult to push from the minority position a change, which would be what feminism has tried to do. But for a man to redefine gender roles, I think would have more impact. But I think Clinton is himself a bit problematic, largely because of his personality, and secondly because he's a former president. So he's probably going to be given a very defined role. And I don't know if that's Supreme Court Justice or Ambassador to the Court of St. James or Ambassador to the UN, but it's going to be something that I think fairly restricts his activity.
So the characters that you have created, the fictional characters, Garth Teller and Melinda Sherman, Melinda running for president, Garth Teller being this political strategist. Can I ask you, how much of Gerald Weaver is in either of those characters, given your own background?
Oh, I probably say there's a little bit of both. I mean, of me in both, I should say. Part of the book, too, and this is certainly fourth or fifth down the line, is that it's largely a homage to every novel ever written by Charles Dickens. And when I read Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens, there's the little girl who's taking care of her father in Marshalsea Prison. I realize that little girl is Dickens. And so you're absolutely correct to assume that much of Melinda Sherman is myself, although she's clearly a woman and has different issues in a different setting than me. And Garth, I suppose, relies a lot on my experience, as I said, about being a single father, being a political operative, and then coming back and finding some sort of career redemption and also romantic redemption in this woman who he loves and who runs for president, and he ends up taking care of her and taking care of the kids and sort of serving her interests and being a very manly man all at the same time. You've been quoted as saying that politics is like socializing with consequences. What were the consequences for you? Well, I suppose that everything I ever did had a consequence. In politics, I had a lot of success in not doing the traditional favor trading that happened with lobbyists and people in the government when I was a lobbyist, because I would only ever ask people to do things that I knew were in their interest, and I looked for synergies. So I tried to be, in that way, very socially likable and acceptable. And then, of course, I got caught up in what was called the U.S. House Postal Scandal because of a group of friends of mine, and I ended up being sent to federal prison. You were chief of staff for Congressman Joseph Coulter, weren't you? Right, and they were trying to find out what they could about him and a handful of other congressmen. So they focused on some of us who might have known something and took our lives apart. This is your new life, though, as a novelist. Is it one that is giving you just as much excitement, just as many challenges? Perhaps you can sleep at night better. Absolutely not. I get up at 4 a.m, and sometimes I get up at 2 a.m. because I had this urge to write, and I run to the whatever it is I'm writing, and it begins to talk back to me. And it is absolutely, with the exception of the time when I was raising my kids, and particularly when I had custody of them, when raising them myself, it's one of the most exciting times in my life. I really enjoy it, and it's fun, and it is quite challenging.
Gerald Weaver, thank you very much indeed. The First Gentleman is published by London Wall Publishing. It's out on the 1st of August. More details on the Janus Forsyth webpage.